The old woman stood frozen outside the small neighborhood bakery, her trembling hands gripping the empty handle of a worn shopping bag as the cold morning wind wrapped around her thin shoulders. Hungry customers brushed past her without a second glance, while a few whispered that she was probably begging again. Inside the bakery, the smell of freshly baked bread filled the air, but for her it was only another painful reminder that she had not eaten since the previous afternoon. Just as she quietly turned away, believing another day would pass without food, a humble janitor wearing faded blue overalls stopped sweeping the sidewalk, reached into his nearly empty pocket, and spent the last few dollars he had on a loaf of warm bread for the stranger. He had no idea that the frail woman before him secretly owned one of the largest business empires in the country, and that this simple act of kindness was about to change both of their lives forever. Before we continue this unforgettable story, take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who still believes kindness can change lives, and subscribe to the channel if you believe that even the smallest good deed can create the greatest miracle. Marcus Hill had worked as a janitor at Brookside Financial Tower for almost 12 years. Every morning before sunrise, he arrived carrying the same old lunchbox, cleaning supplies, and a quiet smile that somehow survived despite the hardships life had thrown at him. His paycheck barely covered rent for the tiny apartment where he lived with his younger sister Emily after their parents had passed away years earlier. Emily dreamed of becoming a nurse, but the cost of college kept growing while Marcus worked extra shifts, sacrificing almost everything to keep her dream alive. His clothes were old, his shoes were worn, and his hands were rough from endless hours of scrubbing floors that wealthy executives hardly noticed. Most people in the office never learned his name. To them, he was simply the janitor who emptied trash cans, polished marble floors, and quietly disappeared before important meetings began. Some employees smiled politely, but many ignored him completely. A few even complained whenever they saw him cleaning nearby, acting as though his presence disturbed their perfect world. Marcus never answered bitterness with bitterness. Instead, he believed that character was measured not by how people treated him, but by how he chose to treat others. Every morning before work, Marcus stopped at the same small bakery near the subway station. The owner, Mrs. Carter, often greeted him warmly because she knew he never bought anything expensive. Usually, he purchased only a simple loaf of bread and a cup of black coffee before rushing to work. She often slipped an extra pastry into his bag, pretending it had been baked incorrectly so he would accept it without feeling embarrassed. That particular Tuesday felt different from the moment Marcus stepped outside. The sky was gray, heavy clouds threatened rain, and an unusual silence hung over the streets. As he approached the bakery, he noticed an elderly woman standing near the entrance. Her coat was clean but extremely old, her shoes were elegant yet badly worn, and despite her fragile appearance, there was something dignified in the way she carried herself. People assumed she was homeless. Several customers walked around her as though she did not exist. One impatient businessman even shook his head in annoyance when she accidentally blocked the doorway for a moment. The woman quietly apologized, but nobody stopped to listen. Marcus entered the bakery, ordered his usual bread and coffee, then noticed through the window that the old woman was slowly walking away, her shoulders trembling from exhaustion. Something deep inside him refused to let her leave hungry. He quickly reached into his wallet. After paying rent and setting aside money for Emily's tuition, only a few dollars remained until payday. Buying another loaf of bread meant he would skip lunch that day. He paused only for a second before asking Mrs. Carter to wrap another fresh loaf. Walking outside, Marcus caught up with the elderly woman and gently offered her the warm bread. At first she refused, clearly uncomfortable accepting help from a stranger. But Marcus simply smiled and insisted that everyone deserved breakfast. Finally, tears filled her tired eyes as she accepted the bread with both hands. She thanked him softly, asking why he would spend his own money on someone he had never met. Marcus answered with quiet sincerity that kindness should never depend on whether someone can repay it. Sometimes people simply need another human being to remind them they are not invisible. The woman studied his face for a long moment, almost as though trying to memorize every detail. She asked his name, where he worked, and whether life had been kind to him. Marcus laughed gently and admitted that life had certainly been difficult, but he still considered himself blessed because he had his sister, honest work, and hope for tomorrow. Unknown to Marcus, the elderly woman was Eleanor Whitmore, the reclusive billionaire founder and CEO of Whitmore Global Industries. For years she had secretly visited different parts of the city dressed in ordinary clothes, observing how people treated those they believed had nothing. After losing her husband and only son in separate tragedies, Eleanor had become deeply distrustful of wealth and the people surrounding her. She wanted to know whether genuine kindness still existed in a world where almost everything seemed driven by money. That morning she had deliberately left her security team behind and carried no identification, no credit cards, and no luxury car waiting nearby. She wanted to experience the world without the protection of her fortune. After hours of walking, hunger and exhaustion had become painfully real. Hundreds of people had ignored her. Only one man had chosen compassion over convenience. Marcus wished her well, hurried to work, and thought little more about the encounter. He spent the rest of the morning cleaning conference rooms before executives arrived for an important board meeting. As usual, nobody paid much attention to him except one young intern who thanked him for helping clean up a spilled coffee. Marcus smiled, believing small moments of respect mattered more than expensive rewards. Meanwhile, Eleanor returned to her private residence. Her security staff panicked after discovering where she had been, but instead of becoming angry, she quietly instructed her assistant to investigate a janitor named Marcus Hill working at Brookside Financial Tower. She wanted to know everything, not how much money he had, but how he treated people when nobody important was watching. By late afternoon, the first reports arrived. Every page told the same remarkable story. Marcus regularly donated blood, volunteered at a neighborhood shelter twice each month, secretly paid for groceries when struggling families came up short at the checkout, and had never accepted praise for any of it. His co-workers described him as the kindest employee in the building. Even Mrs. Carter from the bakery shared stories of how Marcus often helped elderly customers carry their bags home before heading to work himself. Eleanor slowly closed the report, her eyes filling with emotion. For the first time in many years, she felt something she thought had disappeared forever. The following morning, Marcus arrived at Brookside Financial Tower exactly as he always did, completely unaware that his life was about to change forever. He picked up his mop and bucket, greeted the security guards with his usual warm smile, and began polishing the marble floors in the grand lobby. Around him, expensive suits hurried toward elevators, conversations about million-dollar contracts echoed through the building, and nobody noticed the quiet man making sure everything looked perfect before the workday began. For Marcus, it was simply another ordinary morning. But for someone else, it was the day a promise of kindness would finally be repaid. Shortly after 9 o'clock, a line of black luxury vehicles stopped outside the building. Senior executives rushed toward the entrance, whispering nervously. Employees exchanged confused glances as security officers cleared the lobby. The chairman himself hurried downstairs to welcome a very special guest. Marcus stepped aside with his cleaning cart, assuming another wealthy investor had arrived. He lowered his eyes respectfully and continued working. Then the elevator doors opened. Standing in the center of the lobby was the same elderly woman he had helped outside the bakery. Gone was the worn coat and tired appearance. She now wore an elegant navy blue suit, carried herself with quiet confidence, and was surrounded by assistants and security personnel. Every executive in the building greeted her with deep respect. Marcus froze. The elderly woman smiled warmly as her eyes met his. The chairman proudly introduced her as Eleanor Whitmore, the billionaire founder and CEO of Whitmore Global Industries, whose company was preparing to purchase Brookside Financial Tower. Gasps spread through the lobby as employees realized the humble stranger from the bakery was one of the richest women in the country. Instead of walking toward the executives waiting to impress her, Eleanor slowly crossed the lobby until she stood directly in front of Marcus. Without caring about the shocked faces surrounding them, she gently thanked him once again for the loaf of bread that had restored not only her strength but also her faith in humanity. She explained that during years of testing people's character, countless wealthy individuals had ignored her, while the poorest man she met had chosen compassion without expecting anything in return. Silence filled the lobby. Many employees lowered their heads in embarrassment as they remembered walking past the elderly woman the previous morning without even offering a smile. Eleanor then surprised everyone even further. She asked Marcus to accompany her during the building tour. The executives looked uncomfortable. Some quietly protested that a janitor had no place in such an important meeting, but Eleanor calmly replied that character mattered far more than job titles. She reminded everyone that clean offices, polished floors, and respectful service were just as valuable as boardroom decisions because every honest worker contributed to the success of the company. Marcus walked beside her with humility, still struggling to understand what was happening. Throughout the day, Eleanor asked him about his family, his dreams, and the challenges he faced. Marcus never complained about his difficult life. Instead, he spoke proudly about his younger sister Emily and her dream of becoming a nurse. He admitted that sometimes paying the bills felt impossible, but seeing Emily continue her education made every sacrifice worthwhile. That answer touched Eleanor more deeply than any business presentation she had attended in years. Over the next several days, Eleanor quietly continued investigating Marcus, not searching for perfection but for consistency. Everywhere she looked, she discovered the same truth. Neighbors described him as the first person to shovel snow from elderly residents' driveways. Teachers remembered how he worked part-time throughout high school to help support his family after his parents passed away. Even former co-workers said Marcus never allowed hardship to make him bitter. 1 week later, Eleanor invited Marcus and Emily to the headquarters of Whitmore Global Industries. Believing he was simply being thanked once again, Marcus wore his only suit, one that was several years old but carefully pressed. Emily nervously held her brother's arm as they entered one of the most luxurious buildings they had ever seen. Inside the executive boardroom, dozens of senior leaders stood waiting. Eleanor smiled as Marcus entered. She announced that every successful company needed leaders with integrity, compassion, and humility, qualities that could never be purchased with money. She then offered Marcus a newly created position as Director of Community Relations, responsible for leading charitable outreach programs, employee volunteer initiatives, and community partnerships across the entire corporation. The role came with professional training, an excellent salary, full benefits, and opportunities for further education. Marcus stood speechless. Before he could even recover from the shock, Eleanor made another announcement. Whitmore Global Industries would fully fund Emily's nursing education, including tuition, books, housing assistance, and every expense until graduation. Emily burst into tears. Marcus could barely find the words to express his gratitude. But Eleanor gently reminded him that none of this was charity. It was an investment in someone who had already proven that true wealth begins in the heart. Months passed. Marcus embraced his new responsibilities with the same humility he had shown while cleaning floors. Instead of forgetting where he came from, he launched nationwide programs providing scholarships for children of maintenance workers, janitors, cafeteria staff, and security guards. He expanded employee volunteer projects, organized food drives, and created emergency funds for struggling families. The culture of Whitmore Global Industries slowly transformed. Employees became kinder. Managers treated staff with greater respect. People learned that every person deserved dignity, regardless of their position. Even Mrs. Carter's little bakery became part of Marcus's outreach program, providing fresh meals to elderly residents living alone. One quiet afternoon, Marcus visited the same bakery where everything had begun. He bought 2 warm loaves of bread and walked outside with Eleanor. Together they sat on a nearby bench, watching strangers pass by. Eleanor admitted that she had spent years believing wealth could protect people from loneliness, only to discover that genuine kindness was far more valuable than billions of dollars. Marcus smiled and replied that sometimes changing someone's life costs nothing more than sharing a simple loaf of bread. If this story has touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who still believes that kindness can change the world. Before this story ends, tell us in the comments, what small act of kindness has changed your life forever? As the sun slowly disappeared behind the city skyline, Marcus realized that he had never become rich because of the money Eleanor gave him. He had become rich the moment he chose compassion over comfort on that cold morning outside the bakery. One loaf of bread had fed a hungry woman, restored a broken heart, inspired thousands of employees, educated a future nurse, and reminded an entire nation that the greatest fortunes are not measured by bank accounts but by the lives we choose to lift. Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness becomes the greatest legacy a person can leave behind. And that is a kind of wealth that can never be lost.